So continuing with the current commentary, part tres of tres, presumably. So how it seems like a sellout kind of thing of like, or a self-hating thing of aspiring or emulating some kind of superficial characteristic that's featured by a group that's um, framed as the oppressor. So it's like a self-hating thing, and then but then there's also like, wait a minute, are you trying to like clean up like is it kind of like a nod to the daughter or uh, like an endearing quality, like she's abducted and missing and now her hair is the sweetest, and so it's some kind of thing. So it's like for that to be like the concluding one of the concluding lines, it's like that's dissatisfactory to some, and it's not dissatisfactory. It isn't necessarily a bad thing. Maybe that's part of the point of the challenge in the conditions. Um, so other things, the well being a metaphor, I have to like absorb that a little bit further to see to consider its application in the story, perhaps intentionally, but also even further. The deepness of the well, it echoing back when you're conjuring Hades. That's obviously rather serious. And then how does that match with the narrator's plot in life? And the angst that she's experiencing, the perhaps the limbo that she's in, physically, geographically, socially, chronologically, and additionally. Um, so that's an interesting thing. Oh, it's dangerous. It's in the middle of the bush, in the middle of the weeds and everything. So and then particularly when she describes the thought of being trapped within it and how scary that is. So life. Um, I'll say one thing that actually was actually somewhat uncomfortable, awkward in reading that. Very again, the author is very descriptive, and it begins with the sense, but then she's also talking about. Oh, I'll say one thing about sense. I like the references to the plants, like the mint, even though the author, the narrator didn't take a liking to the mint that much, but it's a very natural feel to it, and so the reader, I think, feels increasingly immersed within the conditions. But then she continues with that descriptive language with like other scents, like when she talks about like the bounce dryer sheets or something like that. And so it's like, wait a minute, you're conjuring also. Yeah, I know what that smells like. I share that frame of reference. But then wait, oh, no, I don't want it. I don't want that to be like a feature thing because I'm trying to like progress beyond that to evolve from that. So, and then when she talks about like the raisinets and this and the other, and it's like pop culture, mass marketing references. Let's not be nostalgic about that. And there was a lot of nostalgic factor. Again, this joint was written 20 years ago, so these were references a lot from the 80s and 90s, um, and thereabouts. So, um, anyways, that was a little bit like I do know that, and I get the feel of it, but then I also get like the feel of the angst in getting off of that. So there's that. But here's the thing that was awkward, particularly in reading, was just the physical intimacy that's described, giving a young girl a bath. So for middle aged dude like myself, yo, I ain't got a place for that. You know what I'm saying? Like giving a girl a bath, nah. So even reading the description of it, it feels almost pornographic. And obviously these are words, but still, it's like that kind of, and that might be my own guilty conscience being increasingly active or whatever else, but perhaps with rightful reason. So when she talks about the bathroom scene and the girl being naked and she's going exploring and she finds the Playboy, this that and the other, and so there's this. We have to be careful about the notion of the indulgences and then the physical proximity. And she talks about the girl's body, and obviously that plays a significant role in terms of like the notion of perfection. And there's the mole and everything else like that. So there's a certain purposefulness in describing the body, but still, I'm not just saying a criticism of the writing. I'm just saying like uh, a mindfulness, and that even in talking about things or thinking about things like we have to be careful about how much we invite people into certain experiences that we have, particularly when it's children and particularly when it's in those kind of experiences of sensitivity, even when it's just a fictional narrative or a semi autobiographical narrative or whatever else. We have to be very mindful. Because even in talking about it, there's a certain normalization. Even when criticizing it and critiquing it and evaluating it, there's an increasing normalization of it, so that any occurrence of it happening in actual life is framed within that context. And then it's like, oh well, we read about this in here, so what about in this situation? And it becomes increasingly difficult to make the distinction about like, no, we don't do that. I don't care what's written over there or this, that, and the other. So that's one of the experiences, and then obviously for the child to be missing. To be honest, I'm uncertain when that was actually revealed. Like in the story, the missing child, the missing girl is first before she talks about her babysitting experience. So at what point does it become explicit that that is the girl that it goes missing? Um, I, when I'm reading out loud for the first occasion, I'm paying attention to reading and just following the story as much as I can. So I'm uncertain, like when the actual name reveal and everything else was explicitly said, let alone implicitly referenced. What I will say is this, though. Obviously, I mean the whole scenario of like the pristine Eurocentricity is familiar, and the notion of um, acceptance and fitting in and evaluation and imperfection and just additionally is something that's um, angstfully familiar, um, but also like it's a distant recollection of my experience because I abstain from involving or dedicating or immersing myself in those kind of environments. So it's been a number of years since I mentioned this. I'm getting a little bit of a deja vu kind of experience, but I know cats are still deep in it at this moment and like experiencing the angst of that. But the thing is, what are you holding on to? Why do you put yourself to that? You have a choice, and you're like, oh, but if I don't do it, then I don't get this or that. Well, you go without this, that, and the other, and find it someplace else in a different way, to a different degree, even to a greater degree. But it's very difficult to kind of continue to have empathy for people who voluntarily, and obviously there are different degrees of voluntarism and everything, but it's a matter of recognizing what we're holding on to and recognizing the costs that are associated with that, and stop blaming people who are doing it, and start taking some responsibility for doing it, for us doing it, and for encouraging ourselves to be increasingly independent and autonomous accordingly. So um, that's what I consider when the author talks about being in the family's house and living by the rules and being basically degraded and accused of theft and being set up for theft, being accused of theft, and then being kicked out, even in the evaluation or the decision of how much to pay her and oh, but it's worth much where she comes from, all that racist stuff. You can go without that. But one of the interesting things that I consider after that is how what she refers to her grandfather as Mr. Agarwal. That's interesting. That's troubling. That's revealing. That says much. But it's interesting how even in that banter, the back and forth that is shared beforehand. And to be honest, I still am. That's presumably that's her grandfather, but maybe not. I, Again, it's difficult for me to discern when it was explicitly stated. She talks about her grandfather. She talks about staying with her grandfather, but she never refers to Mr. Agarwal as her grandfather. So either way, and the way she talks to him is obviously doesn't have the type of respect that one typically does for one's grandfather within many cultures of the earth, particularly in Desi culture. Um, but all that being said, after the back and forth is established in the beginning of the story, the sarcasm or the smart aleckness or whatever else, there's a certain comfort, and the author doesn't say this too much explicitly, but so you get the conversation between the young sister and her and Mr. Agarwal, the back and forth and resentment, and she describes it a little bit. It's not tough. She's living with him, so they deal with it, but she doesn't like it too much. Then she goes to do the babysitting, and she's in that environment, and it's increasingly, it has all these riches and new things to discover, but it's increasingly antagonistic to her, to the point of actually literally kicking her out. And she wanders the wilderness for hours, and then she finds her way back home with Mr. Agarwal and her more. And even where there is that previous discomfort and that continuing back and forth when she's filling in the well, there's a certain amount of familiarity and a certain amount of comfort, a certain amount of refuge and safety within that familiarity, within that back and forth. And so there's a certain amount of recognition of that. Like, yeah, this ain't perfect, but yo, this is my home base. And at least I don't have to worry about being kicked out without my feet wear out onto the street. So that's something to keep in mind when when evaluating these conditions and these cultures and these walks in life of grabbing for the riches, but what are the prices that come with those riches? I'm reminded of a story from Aesop's Fables, from Greco-Egyptian tradition, where there's a country mouse and there's the city mouse, and the city mouse, they're cousins, and the city mouse goes to visit the country mouse, and the country mouse or the city mouse says, "Oh, country mouse, you're living out here, and you're feeding off these like rotten this and the other, and back in the city we got all types of nice food. You need to visit me because the city mouse was the one who visited the country mouse all the time. So the country mouse says, I guess I will one day visit you. So one day the country mouse does visit the city mouse and goes into the city, and the city mouse says, oh, it's about time you visit. Oh, come on, let's go feast on this and then the other. And they start going into have some food, and indeed, the food is nice, this and the other. However, in the middle of their dining of the fresh delicacies, all of a sudden, whoom, a broom comes in, and the mice have to drop everything they have and run for their life or die. And so they find another safe, quiet place, whatever. And oh, look at these scrumptious this, that, and the other, bread and cheese or whatever else. And they start feasting again. And then all of a sudden, again, whoom, another big whap, and they got to run for their life again. So everywhere they find the delicacies, they got to run for their life. And so the country mouse is like, you know what? You do got that nice food here. It's very tasty. It's very delicious. It's very fresh. But you know what? I don't feel like living like this, like about to die, this, that, and the other. I'm going back to the country. And yeah, it may be rotted corpses and rotten this and the other. And it may be just simple stuff, but at least I don't have to worry about being killed left and right wherever I go. So there's always a price that's paid. Whereas as nice and green as the grass looks on the other side, there's something going on that you just don't know about. And there are other things of consideration from this narrative of, what's it called again? Wayward. Haha, interesting. So anyway, that's some thoughts for the moment. That's what I leave it at. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Still haven't found out that reference. That's alright. Namaste. Assalamu alaikum. Shalom. Zajin. Adios. Te chakaris. Asimpin asamudbo. Kile ufred. Love and peace.